This meeting is being recorded.
So we're waiting on Mary Fagan and Vicki Granowitz. I will take roll call to establish a quorum. There we go. Okay. All right. Welcome back. Hope everybody had a great lunch. I did. I'm going to take roll call to make sure we still have an established quorum. Dolores Trujillo is present. Vice President and Board Member Mary Fagan.
Mary Fagan present.
Board Member Jovita Dominguez. We can come back to Jovita. Board Member Tricia Nguyen. Board Member David Lawler.
David Lawler present.
Thank you, David. Board Member Vicki Granowitz.
Granowitz present.
Board Member Allison Cormack. Board Member Nilu Patel.
Patel present.
Thank you. I believe we still have a quorum. Jovita Dominguez.
We do have a quorum, and I did reach out to staff to see if they can assist getting Jovita back on.
Okay. And we have Reza present and you present, Lori. Okay. All right. Moving on to agenda item 6.1. Discussion and possible action regarding appointment by board president of committee members and or chairs and approval by the board. I would like to, at this time, appoint board member Allison Cormack to the enforcement committee. And I would like to appoint board member Nilu Patel to the LEDGE committee, legislative committee. I would like to make a motion to accept these appointments.
I'll second.
Tricia Nguyen second.
Looks like we got Mary as a second, and Tricia came in slightly behind.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mary. All right, let's open it up for public comment. BRN moderator, please open for public comment.
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. Before we take it to a vote, and Jovita, I don't know if you were present, we have a motion on the floor to appoint Allison Cormack to the enforcement committee and Nilu Patel to the legislative committee.
I was having technical difficulties and I just got on. So yes, I support. Thank you for giving me a synopsis.
Thank you. Before we go to the vote, is there any comments or questions from any of the board members? No? All right, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan?
Mary Fagan, yes.
Board Member Jovita Dominguez?
Jovita Dominguez, yes.
Board Member Tricia Nguyen?
Nguyen, yes.
Board Member David Lawler?
David Lawler, yes.
Board Member Vicki Granowitz?
Granowitz, yes.
Board Member Allison Cormack? And Board Member Nilu Patel?
Patel, yes.
All right, thank you and welcome. All right, next agenda item. This is the 6.2 discussion and possible action, election of board president and vice president.
Yes, thank you. So I will take the lead on that for you.
Thank you.
So for our statutory requirement, we are required to appoint or reappoint a board president and vice president on an annual basis. So we are bringing it to this board meeting to get a board member and a vice president in place for the next year. And so at that point, I open up on president. Any nominations for president?
Nate, our esteemed chair, Dolores Trujillo, who's been doing a great job leading this board for the past couple of years.
David
I
Lawler, I
would
second.
second that as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think David beat Vicky as a second. But I'm glad that everybody is jumping in so easily with that.
Thank
So
you.
we'll open it up for appointments of vice president.
I would like
Very-
wants to.
For the
would
very
like-
same reasons, I would like to nominate Mary Fagan if she is willing to do that. She's been a great vice president of this board, really helping us through some difficult issues. And for that reason, I would like to move to nominate Mary Fagan for vice president of the board.
I second that. I was going to mention that myself.
Me too.
First and a second on the president and a first and a second on the vice president, but I did hear Reza try to interject, so I want to make sure that we're not missing it.
I was just going to say that those don't have to be the only nominations. So if other board members want to nominate themselves or somebody else, that's certainly.
This is Jovita, and I support I support both of the nominees, and I learn all the time. Every meeting I learn from them, so I appreciate it.
Wonderful, thank you. So it looks like we got a first and a second. Can we open up to public, please?
Public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board EO Melby, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. Okay. Yes, Dolores, would you like to do a roll call vote, please?
Yes, thank you. This is for myself, re-elected as president, and also the re-election of Mary Fagan. We have a motion on the floor. Dolores, I myself vote yes. Vice President Mary Fagan. Board Member Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita, yes.
Board Member Tricia Nguyen. Board Member David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Board Member Vicky Granowitz.
Granowitz, yes.
Board Member Allison Cormack. And Board Member Neelu Patel.
Patel, yes.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to item 7.0. This is report of the Nursing Practice Committee.
Thank you. We can move right on to 7.1. 7.1, I will go ahead and update on the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee, Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee, Clinical Nurse Specialist Advisory Committee, Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist Advisory Committee, and the NEWAC, the Nursing Education and Workforce Advisory Committee. This is going to be a very quick update, as only one committee has met in between the last board meeting and this board meeting. So I will be providing an update on the Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee. They met and discussed various things. One of them is, of course, the next agenda item, but to kind of go over specifically what was discussed in the NEWAC committee that was held on June 15th was, excuse me, going over various ground rules and establishing stuff, going through minutes. And then, actually, you know what? I don't think this was June. So June, we will discover we actually had 2 meetings, I believe, of NEWAC. So the first one held on June 15 was an interested parties meeting. That interested parties meeting, we established ground rules. We discussed what the intent of hearing from the public was, and they broke it down into specific items. And so the first item discussed was where healthcare professionals, stakeholders, and consumers and interested members really discussed the retention and resilience of the RN workforce. And that included faculty and pre-licensure nursing programs. So they went ahead, they had a bunch of discussions, some helpful information, some redirect, because of course we cannot have input on, salary and hiring and everything. But we did go over and discuss things that were within the realm of the jurisdiction of the BRN. The next one we talked about at length with that stakeholders group would be an academic practice gap, where they really discussed if the nursing programs were adequately preparing them for safe entry-level practice into nursing, knowing, of course, the study that was just shared with us moments ago, that there is a gap. We also discussed areas that workforce could come in and support that, as we are very much aware that there is an academic practice gap, and that actually widened much more throughout COVID. And so a lot of robust discussions around that. And again, additionally, some redirect on what the board has any jurisdiction over versus what we would not have jurisdiction over. The next one talked about clinical placements, impaction, and clinical displacement, and really what to work around with that. We do know that this absolutely does fall underneath the board's purview. We collect data on this. We approve all clinical placements for pre-licensure nursing programs. We do not approve the clinical placements for our advanced practice nursing programs that are still underneath our jurisdiction. And we really just talked about the impact of academic growth and what can happen and how we can continue to support the workforce, looking at various community settings, not just strictly setting in and choosing hospital-based only, and really just the future of nursing and workforce with that. And then looking at academic and clinical partnership. Those were the main ones that were discussed. It was a lengthy meeting. A lot of really good information was worked around and really just focused on what the jurisdiction of the BRN was. There was no motions that came out of it. It was all information only. And the members are utilizing that in their individual subcommittees moving forward. The next one that I wanted to cover occurred on September 28th. And September 28th, that was a meeting that was held again remotely. And there were some agenda items on there. One of them focused on the, just choosing meeting dates. That was very basic. They did establish 2 meeting dates for the next year. They also went in and discussed potential changes to the registered nursing survey and the process for seeking some community feedback. That is the workforce survey that goes out every other year. And that was not our pre-licensure nursing program. And there was a lot of really good discussion, a lot of discussion around DEI, a lot of discussion about workplace barriers and such that we could hopefully be able to gather, and even though we don't have a lot of jurisdiction on what we can do currently legislatively to address any of those, we are an amazing resource for collecting information. And so that information source can be utilized to create policy change going forward. Another one that was discussed was the report from Simulation Standards Subcommittee. I will defer reporting on that in this update and go to the next agenda item for that so that we don't have to hear it twice. And then the last one was really working to establish some subcommittee work. The NEWAC committee, as with the rest of our advisory committee, meets on twice a year. And by meeting twice a year, there's a lot of empty time in between that can really be utilized to move issues forward, and then utilize those subcommittees to then report out at the NEWAC advisory committees on some of the discussions that they had, any findings that they came up with, and then have them vote and provide further guidance or discussion around it. And so with that, they did establish 7 subcommittees, one on clinical placement and impaction, one on cultural competency, one on diversity and pathways to nursing, one on the theory practice gap and new grad orientation, one on workforce retention, another one to focus on curriculum standards and guidelines, and then faculty. And actually that one is a 6th because it's curriculum standards, guidelines, and faculty as one. I apologize for that. So with that, we did get those established. Some members were appointed to. Some of them will continue to work forward with getting those fully appointed, onboarded, oriented, and they can start working on that. So any questions on the NEWAC update? No? Okay, real quick, just as an FYI, the Nurse Midwife Advisory Committee was scheduled to be held in September. We were in person at that point. And when we were in person, we did not establish quorum, and so they did not meet. I did misspeak, and the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee did meet, and they did meet on September. Again, they voted on meeting dates. They set 2 of those for the next year. With the nurse practitioner, I went ahead and provided an update to AB 890 and some of the issues that we were hearing about regarding stakeholders. Asked to include retired national certifications and because right now the current national certifications at the population focus is accepted, and then really working on disciplinary guidelines, and then discussings around establishing some subcommittee for disciplinary cases when reviewing for nurse practitioners. So a lot of progress made with the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee. Reza provided some very clear guidance on where their role lies, where the board role lies, and where we fit within the judicial system, and that there were some misconceptions of what they could participate in, and that was clarified just so that there wasn't any conflict in various laws. And so that meeting went well. Again, no motion coming to our committees or to the board, but just work internally there. And so one continuing update, it was not a meeting, but we are working to establish the Nurse Anesthetist Advisory Committee as the Clinical Nurse Specialist Advisory Committee. And we have not been able to fully appoint anybody into those. We did get all of the CRNAs, the 4 of those appointed in, and we did get all of the CNSs appointed in. We were waiting to fill public members. In the CNS role, we did appoint a new member, and remembering that establishing that was that the EO were to do the review and make the suggested appointment to the admin committee, and the admin committee would vet it. And then we would report out at the board that this occurred. So Angelique Ellen Bow, she's a LCSW, is appointed to the CNS committee as a public member. We are now fully staffed in the CNS committee, and we look forward to orienting, onboarding, and getting our first advisory committee scheduled for CNSs. As we know, we have no regulatory guidelines for both CNSs and CRNAs at this point. It is strictly statutory. So our next call to action. We're going to beg and plead, and it is still up on our website, is we are looking for a public member for our CRNA group. We did have a couple applicants that applied for it, but they did not complete the application process. We either received incomplete applications or missing documents, and so at that point they were not able to move forward. We did extensive reach outs, and some just did not return any contact from us. So if anybody knows a public member that is interested in CRNA practice, please have them reach out to our board, specifically Macaulay Fuserans, our Chief of Licensing, and we will guide you to the appropriate forms on our website so that we can get that committee up and running. Any questions from the board members as this completes my report out for items 7.1.1 through 7.1.5? Okay, this is information only, so we'll open it up to public comment, please. No motion is needed.
Thank you.
Public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, moving on to item 7.2, discussion and possible action recommendations from the Nursing Education and Workforce Advisory Committee on Simulation Standards.
Thank you. So during that NEWAC meeting that I discussed that was held in September, the simulation subcommittee did bring forward their work that they had performed outside of our regular scheduled meetings. The NEWAC committee did make comment and provide some input on that, and they made a motion to bring 2 of the 3 bullet points forward to our board. And so what is in front of the board is we have Business Professions Code 2785.6G. That was part of our sunset bill that was enacted January 1st of this year. And that codified the Nursing Education Workforce Advisory Committee. The NEWAC committee has been working with the BRN since I think 2015, if I remember correctly. And prior to that, they were 2 separate committees. And when they aligned and started doing some work, they provided a lot of information. It was a very large committee of upwards to almost 30 members. And then during COVID, they did not meet. As you can imagine, the people within NEWAC are workforce, they're academic, they're all RNs, and they were all most of them were RNs, and they were very busy during COVID trying to get this all worked out. So when we did re-establish the NEWAC, we condensed the numbers down to, I believe, 16 individuals. And then the legislative representatives decided to codify this so that it was now supported in statute and it wasn't an optional advisory committee. With that, they made one specific recommendation that said the Nursing Education and Workforce Advisory Committee was mandated to study and recommend standards for simulated clinical experiences based on the best practices published by those groups we had mentioned earlier, which is the International Nursing Association for Clinical Simulation and Learning, the National Council of State Boards of Nursing, who you guys heard from today, and the Society for Simulation in Healthcare. With that, understand that that they will study and recommend standards to the board. It does not mean that we need to establish regulations. And the NEWAC committee kind of took that to heart, because the third one was to establish the regulations, and NEWAC said not at this point. They will bring that up on a future agenda for the next NEWAC meeting, so they can have a more robust discussion around that, because not all of them are in agreement with that. So below on agenda item 7.2 on page 6 of that specific agenda item summary, you'll see the 2 recommendations. And the recommendations were that pre-licensure RN programs who use simulation should adhere to at least one of the sets of standards set forth by the companies listed above. And BRN does not need to create new simulation standards for programs. I'm grateful for that recommendation, because I don't want to undertake creating new sim standards. And we are very happy to take the recommendation of utilizing these established evidence-based procedures that are already out there. And so that was one of the recommendations that came to the board. The other one said that the BRN should accept, without requiring additional documentation or action, the accreditation as meeting any simulation requires set forth by the BRN. Again, remembering that we have no regulatory authority on simulation, and no statutory requirements. And so our NECs, when they go out and do their continuing approval visits, do not at this point evaluate any of the simulation standards. And what it looks like here with this recommendation is that if they are following those standards and they are doing the documentation that is endorsed through this, that this should be enough to satisfy the board's oversight. And I'm just going to put a caveat in there. That's in addition to our current oversight around curriculum and the use of clinical hours. And those clinical hours right now in the curriculum is 18 semester units to be done in a clinical lab setting. 500 of those hours must be in direct patient care, with at minimum 30 hours being in each one of the specialty areas as OB, Peds, Psych, Mental Health, and Geri. And that any hours outside of direct patient care are still required to meet the course and clinical objectives that are established. So these simulation standards, this simulation documentation, if our board agrees to accept these recommendations from the NEWAC committee, would be looked at via these recommendations, but would also be, we would continue to do our regulatory oversight by ensuring that all of these simulated experiences outside of direct patient care still meet the clinical objectives that have been established in their curriculum. Any questions?
I have a question, Lori. What are the processes by which they get the endorsement of the, if I get the INACLSL or Society for Simulation in Healthcare accreditation? I'm pretty clear. What's the endorsement from this INACLS or CSL look like, or what's the process for that?
So they're individual process by these private companies. And so though they have guidelines and stuff that are published on their websites that they do go ahead and follow. There's training, there's certification. They contract with the schools. The schools typically go in and say, hey, I think this best fits our curriculum. This also best fits our clientele. One of the studies that NCSBN even talked about when they were presenting today was the National Simulation Study from 2015. In that study, they recommended 50% as a one-to-one kind of ratio for simulation and direct patient care. Part of that, it was also noticed that minorities and male students did not fare as well as others did when utilizing those guidelines. And so it is really up to the nursing program to do an assessment on what their population is and what the needs are of their students to choose which one of these standards, guidelines, endorsements, whatever you want to call them, is appropriate to them. They will then make a meeting with that company that offers this. They will then, typically they go under contract, they provide training to their faculty, they provide experts to their faculty as resources going forward. They help them to do item development, but truly they offer evidence-based scenarios. And they're able to utilize those and incorporate them into meeting the clinical objectives. They go over how important it is to prep the students in advance. And really where a lot of the work comes in is that debrief, and really kind of redirecting the student in a low stakes setting. You know, they're not in a hospital setting. They're not right in front of a patient. They're not, any errors that they make is with a mannequin or a virtual sim or some other choice that they may have. And then they go through what are the key takeaways from that to help prepare them. But again, it is individualized per the company that you contract with. They have their own sets of standards, they have their own requirements, and then we would accept those.
So if programs aren't required to have that endorsement or accreditation, right? So if they don't have that endorsement or accreditation, what's the role that the BRN, what would be the process for the BRN to ensure that they were complying with evidence-based best practices?
We look at the curriculum, we look at the syllabus, the course books, we look at what the objectives are. We look at the clinical evaluation tools. We look at what is happening within your sim labs. We have conversations with the sim, the instructor that is delivering the sim. We ensure that the people that are delivering the sim are approved BRN faculty and that they are recent in that content area within the last 5 years. So that they're bringing true world experience in and that they are competent at the level of the bedside nurse, and that is what's being transferred to the student. Additionally, with that, we always go ahead and make sure that we meet with the students. We get feedback from the students. How is that working for you? Do you have any feedback? Do you feel like you're included in it? Because one of our regulations is student participation throughout the entire curriculum, including evaluation and implementation of it. And then most of our schools have advisory committees as well that they bring in. And so they're meeting with clinical partners, they're meeting with people that have hired them. And then we get feedback from that as well, either by reviewing the minutes of the meetings, participating in them, going out and speaking to the clinical sites, and talking to the students while they're in clinicals so that we can say, you know, were you adequately prepared? When we meet and with the nurses that are on the floor, that the students are in clinicals, we have conversations with them that say, are they getting faculty oversight? Have they been competency validated? Do they know what they are working on? And so it is a very robust review of all clinical aspects, all theory aspects of a program that the NACs do on a 5-year basis for programs that are not accredited, or we follow the accrediting schedule for those that are accredited.
Okay, that's helpful. So if they have the accreditation or endorsement, they wouldn't need to go through all that level of rigor. Is that what the second statement was?
Kind of. We still do that level of rigor, just because the accreditors do that as well, and we go with them. And so when the accreditors come in, we're standing there side by side with them as the BRN, and we do that same review process. So that we're asking the same questions. We might direct that more towards California-based rules, regulations, laws, experiences that we see that are unique to California, because the accreditors have a national perspective. And as we've been told many, many times throughout the meetings, that there is a separate board of nursing in every single state, and that there is a separate set of laws, their own Nurse Practice Act in each state. And so even though the accreditors are an amazing company and they provide wonderful guidance and tools, it is not to a specific focus of the state that they are operating in. And so each one of the accreditors defer to the governing board in the state first. So all academic institutions that are accredited must be fully approved by their Board of Registered Nursing for that state, meet all the rules and guidance of the Nurse Practice Act in that state around academia, And then at that point, they are then work with the accrediting agency so that they can look at it from a different focus, from that federal focus from a private company.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the board members? We have a motion, possible motion. Okay, I will make the motion. I move to accept the recommendations on simulation standards from the Nursing Education and Workforce Advisory Committee. Do I have a second? I think Jovita got it. Bureau moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated this question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate that they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment."
Board Counsel, while we wait for a moment for the public to chime in, just wanted to clarify. So the recommendations were to adhere to one of the sets of standards BRN should accept without requiring additional documentation. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but is this to move it forward for staff to develop regulations? And maybe Lori, if
Not at this point, no. It was just to accept these to move forward with NEWAC. NEWAC had one of the simulation committees within the simulation subcommittee. They recommended regulations, and those regulations that they recommended were following NCSBN proposed regulations. NEWAC said no. And so regulations is not on the table yet for our board to consider. They have NEWAC asked to add that to the agenda for the next NEWAC so they can have more of a discussion on that. That was not a widely accepted recommendation, as they didn't want regulations on that. So right now it's just to accept these as simulation standards, recommendations for simulation standards. They hold no legal authority at this point, as we would need to have regulations in place to require this. But right now that is just a step forward with NEWAC. They will then now discuss at the next committee meeting, advisory committee meeting, regulations, if they do want to move forward with that.
Okay, that's what I wanted to be clear on, that the motion here is ultimately in order to implement this, regulations are needed. So the motion here is to effectively give a positive thumbs up, for lack of a better word, to the NEWAC on these recommendations for them to go back and further flesh out the actual implementation of this and ultimately regulatory text to bring back here for consideration. Is that right? And is that kind of the understanding of
That is my understanding.
you, Dolores, having made the motion?
Yes.
Great. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Before we go to public comment, I have a question. This is Jovita. Lori, so I understood that during COVID, we had to be more lenient because a lot of hospitals were rejecting students to come into their facility. So I think there was leniency as to how many hours they were doing for SIMS. But then once it was lifted and we were almost back to normal, that was changed. Am I correct on that?
You're going down the right path. And so what I'll explain here is our regulations in 1426 G2 states that 75% of each one of the 5 content areas, med-surg, OB-Peds, mental health, and Geri, must be in direct patient care. and that is of your 18 units that are overall dedicated to meet the licensing requirements for clinicals. With that, that leaves 25% that is not necessarily designated as to how it can be carried out. Many of the studies that are put out through UCSF show that most of our nursing programs don't even use the 25% that was allotted for them in pre-pandemic times. Some of the stuff that was given from Brendan today even showed that they dropped back down to that less than 25% being utilized. They weren't even at the 50% that was kind of recommended. But there had been a lot of push from our program directors to have that flexibility as a just in case. They wanted to go to what the recommendations were from 2015's NCSBN SIM study to go up to 50%. Our board had opposed that. When COVID came into it, the first thing that was allowed, because again, a law is a law is a law, we can't break the law. Those laws, even with a state of emergency, had to be followed. So we didn't have any ability to say, it's COVID, things are happening, you're kicked out of clinicals, you don't have to do 75%. We still had to require 75% because we didn't have an ability to override a law. The governor with the state of emergency then gave that power and authority to DCA. DCA then created waivers where they waived section of the law to allow students to progress and graduate, to allow various licensees some leniencies where they would waive requirements of the law. And within that, our DCA allowed for some waivers that made it where simulation could be incorporated more than the 75% that was originally there. Also going back to what Brendan said is that communication. We started sending out a lot of communication. We started reiterating that for fundamentals of nursing, you are not required to have any in-person direct patient care. That can all be in a skills lab. Working with them to kind of rearrange the schedules to, at the beginning, they were hoping that this COVID outbreak was going to only be about 6 months. They proved us wrong. But they were moved the more harder to fill clinical placements like peds, OB, and psych to the next semester, hoping that all that would work. The waiver was in effect and stayed in effect for over a year. Additionally to that, legislation was introduced. AB 2288 was the legislation that was introduced and passed and implemented by our board. And that allowed for peds, OB, and psych, those difficult to place clinical placements, to be 25% direct patient care. And that 25% could be entirely telehealth. There was no in-person requirement for that. The board opposed all of that, but the law came into effect. We had to follow it. Med-Surg and Jerry was kept at a 50%, and it did not drop below that. So you had to have 50% in person, you had to have 50%, you could have 50% simulation. However, 25% of that could still be in telehealth and did not have to be in hands-on with the patient. It could have been delivered, that direct patient care could have done telehealth. So those were some of the specific provisions around simulation. There was, of course, some guidance to use those standards that were kind of brought up in NEWAC as stuff that they could do. We did minor curriculum changes. We brought them forward in front of our board. Our board accepted them, and schools transferred and adjusted as they could to make that work. Another provision that was put in place was the ability to do the direct patient care part of the clinical in the semester immediately following the semester that the theory was offered in. And so an example would be if you're in spring semester and you're doing pediatrics, you would do pediatric theory, you would do all of pediatric simulation. And if you couldn't get a pediatric clinical to do your direct patient care that was required in spring, you could in summer, if you held a summer session, or fall, if you did not hold a summer session, complete the direct patient care clinical hours in peds in that subsequent semester. Those were the provisions that were put in place. Some of those provisions are still up and being utilized until the end of this academic year. But additionally, new legislation was introduced through our sunset, which changed that 75% requirement and changed it to an overall 500 direct patient care with 30 hours dedicated solely to each one of the 5 content areas. So 150 of those hours have a specific designation. The other 350 can be utilized in any of those content areas to give a more robust hands-on direct patient care experience. And then that does allow them flexibility to move and change those direct patient care hours dependent on the needs of the school, the needs of the clinical partners, and really focus on outcomes after getting feedback from the students, feedback from their NCLEX using mountain measures, et cetera, to move those hours to really tailor their curriculum to the needs that they have, meeting the course objectives that are approved by us.
Thank you, Lori.
Yes, thank you so much. And just as a floor nurse, because I do have, I do work on the floor with patient care. I support is but a better word. I support the SIMS, but not to be a large amount of time, because we noticed the new grads that did the majority on SIM, they were lost and they were extremely anxious on the floor because they didn't know how to communicate with patients, something that I know we find basic, but for them it was an enormous amount of stress and they didn't know what to do, not even touch a patient. So I as an educator and as a floor nurse support that we not make it a large amount of percentage. It's there to support, because, you know, it's good to make a mistake with a dummy, you know, and not, you know, so that the support there doesn't ever come to the bedside.
So just a couple points of clarification. The dummy that was mentioned is a mannequin, not a person.
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have, you know, that's an old term. I'm so sorry. I should have said mannequin. A Sims mannequin is more appropriate. But I know that's what, a 70s kind of, because they used to encourage people to use seatbelts and then they would say dummy. So, but yes, and that's just my take as a floor nurse and as an educator. I support it, but as a support, not to be, you know, used in excess.
But the good thing is, Jovitas, we're not voting on hours or percentages. We've actually removed percentages from our board oversight, and we set a minimum hours. And that was set with the legislation that was passed and put into place January 1. So we do require, which is not up for discussion, 18 units of theory, semester units of theory, 18 semester units of clinical in order to obtain licensure as an RN. That theory and clinical must be concurrent. It must cover med-surg, OB, ped, psych, mental health, and GERI. And the clinical component can only be at minimum 500 hours in direct patient care. If you do the math, that's about 864 hours that typically go into an 18 unit semester unit. So that means that 364 hours or close to 400 hours could be in SIM. That SIM would have to follow these simulation guidelines or some sort of competencies that the schools would put on. And what the BRN would ensure is that they're meeting the clinical objectives and that they're done concurrently with the course, the theory course. And there is no other variations that can occur. If the school wants to create an additional simulation experience, a separate course, and offer it as elective or whatever, they absolutely can, and they could then have more simulation. But we are we have strict guidance that says at minimum 500 of those 18 semester unit hours must be in direct patient care with hands-on patient care that has been defined and is out there for them to follow. So that is not up for discussion, Jovita. You don't have to have any concerns with that. This is just guidance of simulation kind of standards that the NEWAC committee will continue to work through.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comment. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, please. All right, we'll take it to a vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan. Board Member Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita votes yes. Thank you.
Board Member Tricia Nguyen. Board Member David Lawler. Board Member Vicki Granowitz.
Granowitz, yes.
Board Member Allison Cormack. And Board Member Neelu Patel.
Patel, yes.
All right, thank you. Next, we have 8.0. This is the report of the Education Licensing Committee. Jovita.
Good afternoon now. This is Jovita Dominguez, the chair of Education and Licensing Committee. And I believe Dr. McCarthy is she on the, oh, thank you. She will lead us. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Mary Ann McCarthy, and I am a supervising nursing education consultant and the liaison to the Education Licensing Committee. So for this meeting today, I just want to start by telling you that agenda items 8.1 through 8.5 were all presented at the Education and Licensing Committee meeting on October 5th, 2023. And each of these items between 8.1 and 8.5 received a unanimous recommendation for approval from the Education Licensing Committee. Now, agenda items 8.6 and 8.7 are items the committee deferred to today's meeting, and 8.8 and 8.9 are information only. So should you choose to accept the ELC recommendations from their meeting on October 5th on items 8.1 through 8.5 in one vote, you may do that, or you can pull out any of the agenda items in that area for further discussion. So if you would please direct me on how you would like to proceed, we will move forward.
I would like to make a motion if there's any, is there any comments or suggestions from the board?
This is Board Member Cormack. I'm trying to follow the numbers that you just described, Ms. McCarthy, and
it's on the agenda. Okay, so we're on 8.0.
So, but you said through, so
8.1.
So there's no, so do you mean 8.1.2? No, you mean 8.1.1, not 8.1.
Right, so that's under 8.1. All the 8.1s are under 8.1 has 1, 2, 3, right? And then the 8.2s, and then the 8.3s and 8.4s.
All right, so
what
is included in consent? That's what I just want to be sure I understand before I vote.
Okay, no worries. So I'm sorry, did I hear someone?
No, that was me, but go ahead, Mary Ann.
Oh, you can, you want to do it?
I was just going to say it's up on the possible motion 8.1 through 8.5.
And so on here is each of the, on the agenda has each of the, what the recommendation was to the board, and then the vote under each one of them. So what the consent is, Allison, is that these items were all discussed at length at the ELC meeting, and this is what their recommendation is to the board. With, like I said, unanimous support for approval of those items.
Okay, one of the things that's confusing is, for example, 8.1.2 says consent, but then when you move to 8.2, 8.2.4, 8.2.5, none of those say consent. So I went ahead, I read it all anyway.
So just to clarify,
so is this about 20 items? is this about 20 items on consent?
These were items, Allison, that we covered in the October ELC meeting, and I don't believe you were present.
No,
it was just
but
the
I watched part of it. I just want to be sure because this is
yes.
So the part that says consent above, there are certain things on the Education and Licensing Committee agenda that are consent, and those are all the, you might remember all the lists that are in the
first
materials.
Of the two worksheets. Okay.
Right. Those are all the list ones. And then everything else that's doesn't say consent just means that these are all presented at ELC, but the consent agenda items are on those lists. The rest of the ones up to 8.5, the schools actually were there, presented, it was heard, and we put it on consent here because it was a unanimous vote to approve. And the board had, I guess it's probably been almost a year now. They decided that, because we used to present everything at both meetings, and they just felt like it was redundant to present everything at both meetings. Therefore, we have an Education Licensing Committee. They can hear if you guys know the vote and you want to accept. It just saves from having to reiterate the same meeting from October to November or from ELC to board. Is that helpful?
Can I add something?
Of course.
I would venture to say they were not controversial.
I understand that. It's just if, it may just be the ordering of the numbers. It's okay. It's about 20 items. So it's all the way up through 8.5.
Correct. All the way through California North State University.
Yeah. Okay. So we're not actually voting on 8.1. We're voting on 8.1.2 through 8.5. Because 8.1 is really a discussion of 8.1.2. I'm sorry to be so particular about this, but this is actually going to be, if a member of the public was trying to follow this is extremely hard to follow. So 8.1.1 is really...
So hang on one second. 8.1 says discussion and possible action regarding ELC recommendations on consent agenda items.
That's what we're doing.
So everything under 8.1, which means 8.1.1, 8.1.2, all of that is under the major heading, discussion and possible action of the recommendations on the consent agenda items. So these were recommended, and you can see like 8.1.1, the vote, Dominguez, yes, Fagan absent, Trujillo, yes, Wynn, yes. 8.1.2, these were also on the agenda as just like this, they're on the lists, and therefore the vote came up as well. These were recommendations to grant discussion and possible action regarding board approval of ELC recommendation to grant continuing approval of pre-licensure nursing programs, approval of clinical experience. Does that help with the vote again? And then 8.2 you'll see is another subheading, but it's still everything they voted on. Discussion and possible action regarding ELC's recommendation related to continuing approval. And then we have 3 different schools that were here for continuing approval. And then we had 8.2.4, which is Cabrillo. They were here for less than 75 NCLEX. And then we had deferred action for career care. So they were all under and presented. Each of the numbers is by the school, but they were all voted unanimously to do whatever it says in that part above, like for Career Care Institute, to defer taking action for now.
This is Reza. One thing I wanted to add, just to be clear. First of all, Allison, I think you're correct as to your understanding of what's going in this. It's roughly 20 or so, everything from 8.1.1 through 8.5. And as far as 8.1.1, I just wanted to call attention. You probably maybe noticed that the rest of the items have schools actually listed on the agenda itself, whereas 8.1.1 does not list actual school names on the agenda. It says in a parenthetical, schools under consideration are identified, in the meeting materials. And that's largely because, one, they're mostly, I think, minor curriculum revisions, and it's a long list to include in the agenda. So that's why maybe also 8.1.1 might not have stood out as like a action item, but it is that all the way through to 8.5. And also, to be clear, it's kind of proposed to be done this way for efficiency, obviously, but any board member can choose to pull out any particular agenda item if you had questions about it or were not, wanted additional information, or if you wanted to handle it separately and drill down on it a bit more, or just handle the vote on it independently.
I think the thing that's confusing is to have consent items that were consent items on a prior one. So it's the fact that we have like 3 different levels of numbering. So that's.
Thank you, Allison.
I understand. I've read them all, and.
No, I appreciate the feedback, and we can certainly look at the numbering and the consent. I don't know if it's essential that, since all of them will be, once they come to the board and they're all on this list with unanimous votes, there's probably no reason to separate out consent from the ELC. So we'll look at that moving forward.
That's just, I think we're voting on consent items from the committee, and then also now we have consent items at this level. So I just wanted to understand that. Apologies for
the no worries.
Lengthy questions.
No worries. They also, even though they're consent items for ELC committee, ELC, it has to come to the board for action. So again, we can look at that, but that's how come it's on there twice, is because they can make recommendations. They cannot, they have to make the action. They, meaning you guys, have to make the action.
Confused now because a subcommittee doesn't have things on consent. They make recommendations for things to go on consent at the board meeting. And so
I'll jump in and try to explain real quick.
If you're not used to a consent agenda, this is a standard consent agenda that you see on board meetings. And so if you're not used to it, and if you don't, but the subcommittee doesn't have things on consent. They hear everything. They recommend to us.
So there's 2 different levels here. So we have board committees, and then we have the board committee that makes recommendations to the board. So during the board committee, and I'll talk about education licensing, but there's also nurse practice, there is LEDGE, there is enforcement intervention committee. So we have 4 board committees. We're only talking about one right now, which is the only one that was held at the last meeting, which was the Education Licensing Committee. That committee does a lot of the work for the board, where they go ahead and they have program directors, assistant directors, public, the nursing education consultants, et cetera, show up and discuss each and every agenda item as needed. They will review that information because that's the subcommittee that focuses on education solely. Allison was appointed to enforcement, so she will work with Trish and others on the enforcement committee to really do the work around enforcement, and they will make recommendations to our board. Mary Fagan is on practice. She is the chair of that committee. She will go ahead and work with the practice committee, make recommendations to the board if anything comes up. And the same with LEDGE, our new board member. Nilu was appointed to LEDGE, who will work with Dolores and others on that committee to go through and do recommendations from the legislative committee to the board, who they may or may not adopt. So when we build the agenda for the Education Licensing Committee meeting, those tables for minor curriculum revisions, progress reports, clinical facility approvals are put on as consent agenda, because the intention is that the NECs have done the review, the NECs have vetted everything, and they are just passing it on to the board, and the board can then accept it. If they want to pull out any of those items for further discussion, they absolutely can. That is not typically done because a progress note is a progress report is just typically an update. A minor curriculum revision is typically like a renumbering, resequencing, something very minor, or a clinical facility approval, something that our NECs do through following the guidance in 1427. That comes through as consent agenda to ELC because they don't pull out and talk about every single one of them. They can, that's typically not done. Then we go into some of the other work of the Education License Committee. When the nursing education consultants do continuing approval visits, either in accredited or non-accredited programs, if on that review, they have met every single rule and regulation that we have, regulation, statute, everything is in alignment, they put it on a table. That is a consent agenda item as well, because again, it has all been vetted through the NECs. There is no issue that needs to be brought forth in front of the board. The board then accepts those reviews. They are granted a 5-year continuing approval, or if they're accredited, it would follow the accreditor schedule of potentially 8 years or 10 years. The schools that have been found to be in non-compliance with any of our regulations or any of our statutes are brought in front of the Education Licensing Committee, not as a consent agenda item, because now there are issues that need to be addressed. These schools have broke the law. And so at that point, they work with our board, they get increased monitoring, they report to the NEC, they make a plan on how to come in compliance with the laws that they're not aligning with. And then the committee continues to watch and follow. Typically the board committee will recommend deferring taking any action that allows the program to stay in an approved status and work towards meeting the requirements of the law and work with the NECs, provide progress reports out to the NEC. And sometimes the board will even say, we want you to report to the committee in person. And so they'll come in person. Once we do the continuing approval visits and we find that they're all in compliance or not, those are the ones that are mandated that we put in and mandate. The other items that come in front of the board are requests from schools. If they want to do a major curriculum revision where they're changing their curriculum completely, adopting a new, nursing theorist, adopting a new mission vision statement, deciding to go from semesters to quarters or from an associate degree to a bachelor's degree, that is bigger. And those will be brought in front of our board for our board committee, for additional discussion. So it would not be consent. If the school requests a new campus location, if they request to increase their enrollment, if they change ownership, that would come in front of our board committee. Those schools would present and they would not be consent agenda. Because that committee is the one that focuses on this and works primarily in this, they would make recommendations. Those recommendations come forward to the board. If that committee is not able to come to an agreement, or if they feel that this is maybe a controversial item, or that they don't have enough information for them to make the recommendations on their own, they may choose to defer taking any action from the committee and leaving it open for presentation and the initial action to be taken at the board. So we have all of these as options that have come forward on this agenda item. For ease, typically the board will say, I make a motion to accept the recommendations from the Education Licensing Committee. And then a second is we go out to public comment, we come back, we do a roll call vote, and items that are encompassed within 8.1, including 8.1, 8.1.1, 8.1.2, etc., all the way through 8.5 are done. You guys, on the agenda, it shows what the vote was. It shows who voted and that it was a majority vote, or that they were all in agreement. And typically that ends that session. If there were items that were not heard by our committee, or items that our committee decided to defer to the board, those would be holdouts. And we have 2 agenda items on this agenda right now, Homestead and West Coast University, that were not, motions were not made as a recommendation to the board from that board committee. And so those will be heard in our board meeting today. And the motion, if made, is coming initially from the full board and not from a committee. All other items have recommendations that are tied to them from the Education Licensing Committee. The board can choose to make a motion to accept all of those and we move forward, or the board can say, I want to accept motions recommended by the Education Licensing Committee on 8.1 through 8.5. I want to pull out 8.3.3 for additional discussion. So we'll make that motion, pull it aside, and then 8.3.3 will then be discussed in this board meeting because the board did not accept the recommendation of the Education Licensing Committee, and therefore they may make a new vote here. So hopefully that helped to provide much more detailed and how that is laid out as how this comes to our board through the Education License Committee. This is how it is set up for all of our board committees. If there is work that needs to be done in the individual committees, they are done in committee and then recommendations to the board. If there is no work to be done in the committees are not held and it just goes straight to board.
Board Member Vicki Granowitz.
Thank you, Lori. Can I make a motion?
Yes.
The motion is to accept the recommendations of the Education and Licensing Committee for agenda items 8.1 through 8.5.
Seconds.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we go to public comment? Okay, BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
Public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in their request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box. I would like to make a comment. Please remember you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, I would like to make a comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no public requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the floor to accept the recommendations of the Education and Licensing Committee for agenda items 8.1 through 8.5. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan. Board Member Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez votes yes.
Board Member Tricia Nguyen.
Nguyen, yes.
Board Member David Lawler. Board Member Vicki Granowitz.
Granowitz, yes.
Board Member Allison Cormack. Board Member Neelu Patel.
Patel, yes.
All right.
We're going to move on then to agenda item 8.6, which is the discussion and possible action regarding a feasibility study for a new pre-licensure nursing program. Lori, would you like to talk about feasibility before I talk about Homestead?
Yes, a little background on what a feasibility study is. In order for new businesses to become approved as a nursing program in California, they have to go through a approval process. That approval process is outlined in regulations, and then further clarification is provided in a document called an EDPP I-01. That EDP I-01 is referenced in regs as well, so that is a form that can be utilized. And so Going through that process, the first step of that process is they notify the board that they intend to become a nursing program in California. They have to get degree granting authority. If it is a California State University, that comes through the CSU's Chancellor's Office. If it is a community college, it comes through the Community College Chancellor's Office. If it is a private university or college, it comes through BPPE, and that's the Bureau on Private Post-Secondary Education. And BPPE will offer a waiver to those that have accreditation. They wouldn't need specific BPPE approval, but they can get that waiver through accreditation as well. Once they're able to be degree granting, they work with our nursing education consultants to go through the process of what is required to become a nursing program in California. It is outlined in the EDPP IO1. And in that IO1, they go through the feasibility study, which is first. They prove that they have budget. They prove that they have resources. They prove that they have an enrollment flow. They let us know what they believe the impact is going to be to the community. They take into consideration other nursing programs in that area. And then they present all of those items to their nursing education consultant. The NEC at that point reviews them, ensures that they've met those, and they bring them in front of the board committee. And then ultimately the board for consideration to approve as a feasibility study. If it is decided that that feasibility is accurate and it's there, the board will vote to approve the feasibility study. At that point, the school will then go and start to invest additional monies. They will find a specific location. They will hire a nursing program director. They'll hire faculty. They'll create curriculum, and they will make the plan to enroll students. At that point, that is called a self-study. And the nursing education consultant will receive a self-study from them showing how they've done all that, how they intend to continue to support that. And then the NEC works to make sure that they are in compliance with all of our rules and regulations. Once they are in full compliance with our rules and regulations, it comes in front of the board committee, then it goes in front of the board, and the board will then vote to accept the self-study, therefore establishing a brand new nursing program. So the feasibility study gives them the okay to go and continue to invest money and move forward, because once they meet all rules and regulations as outlined in the self-study, they will start enrolling students. So this will establish a new program. The reason that this was held is because they wanted the full board to have a discussion. Dr. Marianne McCarthy will open it up and we will have a discussion around Homestead. The specific area of concern was the location that they were trying to open in.
Thank you so much, Lori. Okay, information on this program can be found starting on page 149 in your packet. And board moderator, would you please elevate the presenters on the list for Homestead? Homestead has submitted a feasibility study for an associate degree nursing program in Torrance, California. Torrance, California is in Region 8, which is in Los Angeles County. The program is requesting an enrollment pattern of 30 students in the fall of 24, 60 students in the fall of 25, and 90 students in the fall of 26, and thereafter for an annual enrollment of 90 students. The agenda item summary starting on page 149 includes more details. And following that, starting on page 152, is the data for Region 8, Los Angeles, for the past 5 years. So what has happened in that area for the last 5 years. Program representatives are here should you have any questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marianne. Region 8, is this a currently impacted area?
This is Los Angeles County.
And so just some additional details on board motions. And so when you look at that data sheet under 8.6, on page 152 of the packet, it will show approved and deferred actions. It'll say whether or not the board has done any adjustments. It talks about whether we did enrollment increases, new campuses, whether feasibilities were accepted. whether or not new programs were actually established, new campus locations. And so what is important to note is the enrollment increases typically become effective immediately. The feasibility, that usually says, okay, we've agreed that Chamberlain, West Coast Ultrasound, Angeles, High Desert Medical can establish a nursing program in those areas. And then what you'll see following that is new program. And so you'll see Angeles College as a feasibility, but then you'll see Angeles College right underneath that as a new program. And so in September of 2019, they were approved as a feasibility, which is what Homestead is coming in for. And then Angeles was approved as an actual new program November of 2020. And so their enrollment of 60 annually actually is now a true enrollment of 60 annually, starting a year later. And so you also see March 1st, School of Nursing, which was Glendale Career College. You'll see that they have a new campus in May of 2022, and in West Covina. And with that, they have a brand new enrollment of 135. So these are all board motions from 2018 forward, where the board has approved or deferred taking action, what those were, and that should help the board to kind of see what's going on. The NECs do provide kind of a high-level summary above, which talks about what the school is requesting. This one here, they did add that the closest nursing program was 6 miles away. They talk about the Regional 8, where there were growth of 926 new students, with 14 enrollment increases, 2 new campuses, and 4 new programs. The 2 requests of the enrollment increases in Region 8 were denied. That was Stanbridge, where they were asking for 20 additional students, and American Career College that was asking for 100 students, which means the board has denied a total of 120 new slots. Understanding that that just happened in February of this last year, where we said, no, as a board, you cannot do it. And now Homestead said, hey, I still want to do it, and I want 90. And so that is where it becomes kind of difficult when you're looking at an impacted area. The board's already told other schools that are established 9 months ago that they can't do it. And now we have a program saying, hey, I want to be a new program. I want to start here. Consistent with this was another school that had wanted to start up in the LA area. The board said, your feasibility sounds great. You sound like you could be in a great nursing program. However, we're going to defer to taking any action on your feasibility study because we don't see how that would be feasible to be done in LA. So please go look at another location. Your program sounds like it could be wonderful. It just won't have the resources to thrive in LA. Understanding that in LA County, Western Governors University already closed because they were not able to find clinical placements. If they go more south and start leaking into San Diego just had a program close that was called UMass that was approved through us as Brandman University. They also had a lot of reported difficulties with clinical placements, and so those were denied. And so that is why Homestead was not voted on by our committee and was brought forth to the board to consider whether or not that feasibility can be accepted in a new program started in LA, or if it might be better to say, hey, we understand that you want to start a program, we support that, but you need to find a different location, which would be a deferred action, or you with some direction, or you can just deny it. And say, nope, not at this time, and then you would do a denial. So we have an approval, a deferred, or a denial. That can be options.
This is Jovita. How does it work? Because I'm pretty sure they financially gave a lot of money, or am I wrong?
Financially gave a lot of money to what? I mean, starting a new nursing program costs a lot of money, and that's why we put them through a two-step process. The feasibility is where they reach out to us, provide all the presumptive data. So they say, we can support you budget. This is what we think the impact will be. This is what we're planning on doing, and the BRN needs to accept that before they move forward. So part of the self-study, when they follow the guidelines that are outlined in regulation, would be, okay, I've started the work, I'm doing a huge research project. The board now agrees with me that this is a great location to start this new business. And then they're supposed to go and start actually doing the massive financial commitments where they would hire a nursing program director, where they would secure an actual location, where they would hire faculty, where they would create curriculum, etc.
So, so if we defer, they don't have to give more money to start over in another region. So if we vote on deferment, is my thought process not quite there, or I'm just trying to make sure that, you know, I understand they gave I'm pretty sure an income or, you know, an amount of money. So if we can defer that for them to come back to the board, is my mind is correct?
Kind of, and I'm going to continue to work with that. And so one thing to take into consideration is deferring. Our board is essentially doing nothing. We're deferring taking any action. So an action would typically be I approve or I'm denying. If you defer taking action, that means we don't want to approve or deny this yet. We want more information. We want more time. We're going to give you more time. We're going to allow you to give us more information so that we can then make a decision to either approve or deny. One of the most recent examples for you guys that went through this process was Westcliff University. Westcliff University came to the board for a feasibility approval this year. And I believe, I'm just trying to pull up the agenda real quick, I believe that was in May. And they were asking for a new program.
February, and then they were approved. I'm not sure, but I was just trying to help you. Sorry.
No, awesome. So yes, it actually was February. So Westcliff came in front of our board in February. They wanted to start a bachelor's program and an entry-level master's program, 80 students each, both in Irvine. Our board said, LA is impacted. We think that you might be a good program. We're not going to deny your feasibility, but what we're going to do is give you direction to look elsewhere. So Westcliff University decided to do an additional report, work with the NECs in a additional factor. They did not charge. We as the nursing board did not charge any additional monies to them, and they were able to find a location that would not have the same impact if they were in Irvine. And so then Westcliff came back in front of the board in August, and they were able to get their feasibility approved for a new program that they changed the location from Irvine to Corona. And Corona, although still in Region 8, was much more closer to the Riverside area. They were using Apple Valley clinical locations, etc. The board said, thank you for doing that. We will go ahead and prove your feasibility. Now that school will then do a self-study, and as soon as they've met all rules and regulations, that school will start enrolling students. And so that is why
they'll come forward
so that we would not have them expending too much time and money and energy in a location that the board doesn't believe that could be supported and not have a negative impact on others in that area.
And if I could just add for I'm sorry, Reza, 1 second. If
Yeah,
I
go
could just
ahead,
add, myself and my colleague supervising nursing education consultant and all the NECs, we have to do quite a bit of education to the programs that come through this process, because they do have the misconception that if they pay to come forward to the board to have a feasibility study looked at, that they're for sure going to get a program. And that's not a guarantee. They have to meet first all the regulations and then go through both the processes. So we do quite a bit of education as far as understanding that it's not like you're going to the store and you're paying for a program and you're going to start it tomorrow. Because many of them do believe that they don't understand the process. I'm sorry, Reza, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Thanks, Marianne. This is Reza, Board Counsel. I just wanted to make a minor, comment, clarification about the issue of kind of, suggesting to a proposed school that they locate here versus there. Lori mentioned an example of an instance where it seemed to kind of work out, where the school was able to find a place where there was a greater need, and it was seemed to be kind of a positive outcome. But I just want to be clear: the board isn't really, isn't in the position of steering where schools place themselves. The board's position is to consider a request as it is made, and whether that location, among the other considerations, whether that location meets the need for clinical facilities and all of that. And if not, the board certainly has a say to say that that location doesn't appear to be viable as it did, and that it certainly would be open based on what the rest of the program looks like, that if it were in a position, in a location, I should say, that's more suitable, that it could go forward. But just it's kind of a minor, subtle distinction. But again, to be clear, the board is not really, actively steering things. It's simply, starting with the request as it's presented.
Right. And then the program has to go back. If I could add on to that, Reza, they have to go back and search where, again, do their research like they did the first time on a area that would be, possible, better, and still appropriate for what they want to do.
This is Tricia. I have a question.
Just to close up the point.
Stace. Yeah, go ahead.
So it's, if the board, I think, last point I wanted to make is doesn't really decide that, well, there's another better location, so we're going to, steer you there. It's, if your location that you've proposed is suitable, great. If it's not, then, then the school can go back and look at where it might be more suitable. But it's not, the board's inquiry is not where is a better or the best location for the school to site itself. So I just wanted to be clear there.
Clarification is what is reported out on the feasibility study is the geographic area. And they talk about what is going on in there and whether or not that can support a school. If upon receiving that information, the board would deny it because they do not see how that is feasible, when the school seeks additional clarification as why they were denied, what that would state is, we denied you based on the geographic area, but all of the other areas met. So if the proposed school at that point wants to go and address the geographic area that caused them to get a denial from the board or a deferment, then that is when the program would take that back and consider looking at that item that did not grant them approval and see if they want to address that so that they can then gain approval from our board in the future.
Tricia?
Yeah, thanks very much. I thought the report was very thorough. The one thing that kind of confused me when I was reading it was it said that the Homestead School is involved in a consortium. It does work with its regional consortium, that it had found 23 clinical positions, and yet it's coming in with a 90 student proposal. And I know it's a phased in, but I mean, they must see the writing on the wall. It's a highly impacted area. They're working with their consortium. Someone must have told them. Anyway, I just thought it was, kind of an interesting set of facts in the staff report.
I believe our committee definitely. So that was made very clear, and I'll open up to you, David. When these schools work with consortiums, the way that consortiums are typically set up is all the schools in that area contract with that consortium. That consortium then contracts with various healthcare organizations, and they put in bids for clinical placements. And then through that process, places are approved and denied, and they try to help the programs work amicably together, but none of those are a guarantee. Additionally, if they get a contract for the clinical location, that contract does not guarantee clinical placement. What that means is, say, academic institution A contracts with healthcare institution A, they have a contract, but healthcare institution, as we saw in COVID, at any point could say, I am not scheduling you guys here. Or I thought I could schedule you guys in spring. I'm in fact impacted because I have a new grad program, or I have construction going on. I'm not even going to be able to facilitate this. I might be able to place you in fall. Additionally, if there are complaints received or anything like that, that contract can be void. It can be canceled, or they can maintain the contract and not schedule. There's many things that a clinical facility can do. So a contract does not guarantee clinical sites. Participation in a consortium does not guarantee clinical sites. And when we have healthcare facilities doing signatures stating that they are not going to impact other schools, that is not always accurate, because some healthcare facilities have multiple educators on multiple floors, and they have a view of that floor, not hospital-wide. And some of them, because they are trying to get partnerships established and such, they will sign contract going in saying that they're not displacing when in fact they are displacing. And this has been an ongoing issue that our board has been discussing for at minimum 8 years. So just to provide some of that background.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Lori. That kind of helped answer my question. And my original question was pretty much what Trish has asked. But I suppose what I'm left with is, besides the concern that the request is for 90 students and the availability of clinical placements here, looks like they have 23 secured, maybe, but like you said, let's put quotation marks around that. But in the report, it says that's how many they secured in LA County. And I know we're all talking about Los Angeles as if it's this cute little town, but Torrance is a little area just, tucked away between Long Beach and El Segundo. Are they saying some of these clinical placements might send a student to, Alhambra, Glendale, Santa Clarita? Or are we supposed to assume this means in Region 8? That's what I want to know.
Nothing is of the assumption that it's in Region 8. What you'll see commonly are clinical placements secured wherever they're available. And based on demographic region of the student, a student might actually choose to travel into Torrance to go to school, but they might live in Tribeca Canyon. And then at that point, if they have a clinical placement that's close to Tribeca Canyon, they would then, if they have contract, if they have sites available, go there. Additionally, one thing that the BRN needs that the board needs to really understand here is we are getting a snapshot in time. And so if we approve them right now today with these clinical placements, they might have different clinical placements 2 months from now. They might have no clinical placements 2 months from now. They might have hundreds of clinical placements 2 months from now. Years from now, if they're approved at 90, they might have 90 students, but those 90 students can be located throughout the state. We do not have a regional kind of limiting to them. We don't say this school can only use clinicals in this location. This school can only use clinicals in that location. So the clinicals are primarily led by the healthcare facilities that they partner with and not by our board.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments?
This is Board Member Cormack.
Yes, Allison. Go ahead.
I'm curious about, we just approved, 20 plus here. Would any members of the ELC like to share why they wanted to hold this over? Anything that would help us as we get ready to make a decision?
I believe it was the location, Allison. It's really not the program, it's the location. It's becoming an impacted area.
So then specifically, it was about the 23 versus the 90 in terms of clinical placements?
Well, they're going to start out with 30.
Okay.
Oh, you're talking about their clinical placements of 23?
Yeah. Is that what you went? Yeah, I'm just trying to, extend the conversation.
If I might add, thank you. That's a great question. We were one member short. So, to make a decision that had this much impact, and of course we had to come before the board anyway, we thought, well, let's just have the board hear it. I mean, if I remember correctly, and also because I think there was kind of an inclination to not approve the feasibility study based on the location. So at least that's kind of where I was coming from at the committee meeting.
And again, just to be clear, location is related to the clinical placements, or is there some other dimension of location that's a concern that I'm not aware of?
There is, and I'll go into that one. The also concern is the impact on currently approved nursing programs.
Right.
We want students that are enrolled in those current programs to be able to continue in their education journey and progress and graduate. If there are too many schools in a specific location and not enough clinical placements to support them, then clinical placements are lost and students may not be able to continue. Additionally, established programs that have a BRN approved enrollment already, say they are approved to enroll 100 students every single year, may not be able to get the clinical placements because the clinical placements are now going to a new school or a different school. And that school that was enrolling 100 students per BRN, that is tried and true, that's been able to support this, are now having to cut their enrollments down to maybe 60 students. And so that already established academic institution is now negatively affected by a new campus location, a new program approval, a growth of another program. And so what you don't want to see is that those resources, which are finite, are not taken from another school that then negatively impacts the students enrolled in those other schools. And that's where our public protection comes in, right? When a student enrolls in a program, they have an expectation that they are going to complete and graduate. And if resources become an issue, which include clinical placements, and that is something that the board can help mitigate, that is where the board comes in to look at these, especially with the establishing of new programs and new campus locations through the substantive change process. So it's not just look clinical placements and availability of their contracts and what they say they can do. We have to understand the impact in that area.
So that means we should be looking at the dashboard and we should be looking at the school survey list on the clinical placements, and we should adjust the region to LA area. Okay. So that's the data we should all be looking at in making this decision.
So Allison, on page 152 of the materials is a chart. It tells you approximately how many schools are already in Region 8. I counted either 20 or 21 schools just in that region alone.
So I'm going to correct you.
I think it's more though just than the list of the ones that have been come before the board. The dashboard that I know that Executive Director Melby showed during the ELC meeting really does have a wealth of information when you scroll all the way across and look at that. So I'm just trying to get to the data, and the data, from the dashboard about clinical spaces lost and students impacted. When you adjust for the Los Angeles area, that's why I have to have another computer. Does show, the most recent one is 372 placements, units, or shifts have been lost. The number of students impacted is currently at 1,251. It's come down from the COVID peak. So that's the numbers that I'm just looking at and compare in conjunction with the discussion from the ELC meeting. But if anybody else from the ELC has something to share about why they were concerned, that would be helpful. Thank you.
That's actually accurate, Allison. So I thank you for sharing that. Real quick point of clarification on the Region 8 data, it says these are enrollment decisions from our board. And so what you see on that table are schools that have come in front of our board specifically requesting either a new campus, a new program, an enrollment increase, et cetera. That is not an inclusive list of schools in that area. And that might be something that we want to add to that, and we can consider that going forward.
Yes.
It's Vicki. Can I bring something up?
Yes, thank you, Vicki, for waiting.
Okay, on page 154, there was a discussion of the need for nursing, and they're looking out, projecting for the next 6 years, saying that they're going to need upwards of 20,000 nurses. And what Loretta has always projected to us lately is that with what we've already approved, we will be meeting that. We're not going to meet it today, but that we will be meeting that based on the numbers that we've already got approved. Now, Loretta is gone off, but I know that in this one and the next one, they make a big push on the fact that we're short of nurses. But we're short of nurses, but that doesn't mean that we can just arbitrarily approve spaces because we have a finite number of clinical placements. But the issue is over the next 6 years, which is what we're talking about. 2030 sounds like a long way away, but it's only 6 years. Are we on track to meet our needs for nurses?
That is correct. Per Joanne Spetz UCSF report, we are on track to meet and exceed the nursing workforce by 2029. We will have an excess of nursing workforce in California. Now, it doesn't talk about it as a national level, but in California, we will have that. Additionally, in her report, she talks about various regions and about having surpluses of nurses. LA is an area that she identified as possibly having a surplus of nurses. And in a recent media article that Joanne Spetz participated in, she actually shared that we just need to graduate 11,000 nurses per year to meet that. We are definitely graduating about 11,000 nurses per year. We've continued to approve growth and support that. And then earlier in discussion today with NCSBN, now the real work is we've secured the pipeline. We're doing well with the pipeline. What are we going to do to keep and retain our nurses? And so it is a very, very big discussion, and I'm glad that our board is having it and participating in it.
It's just that I wanted to point out that that information is sort of not really being reported accurately, is how I'm taking it.
That, just so you're aware, is an executive summary that is submitted by the school. So that is what the school submits as an executive summary, and that is not information that is being vetted by our NECs. The NEC is what they submit the agenda item summary and the data sheets. That information comes from our board staff. Right. Sometimes that is in conflict with what the school may present.
It's just they're basing it on Joanne Spitz's report. So that's why I wanted to make sure I clarified that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Vicky, I would also add, based on all of our board meetings and the conversations that I've been either listening to here or moderating on these meetings, when that comes up and the argument is, oh no, there's a nursing shortage, we should open more schools. Like Lori just said, there really isn't a nursing shortage. What there is sounds to me more like a staffing shortage that we don't control because we can't tell the hospitals how many people to hire. So I'm trying to separate in my mind with this feasibility study the difference between what they might call a nursing shortage, which is in reality a staffing crisis because the hospitals just aren't hiring who's all available if they wanted more nurses in their hospitals. And in this area, it's already impacted. I don't see how adding more students in an area that's already impacted is going to help the process at all. So that's just my thought on that conversation. The difference between, the nursing shortage illusion, which we can help with the schools, but we're doing good there, and the staffing crisis, which is not in our purview, as far as I understand it.
I'd like to share a little bit.
Sure, Mary.
Yeah, David. From a nursing administrator perspective, I think the issue is exactly what people have been talking about: is how do we retain the people we get? It's not at all not wanting to hire people; they're just literally not out there. Hospital work is really, really hard work. It's very draining. The pandemic made it even worse. So I think that there's a lot of work that needs 100%. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on retention, but we still are going to need, that's going to be not a quick fix. And we still need to make sure that there's a pipeline knowing that there's going to be a high national turnover of nurses is about 20%. And that's so hard to continue. And you can't find people with experience. People have experience, they choose to not necessarily go into hospitals, which is what we're mostly here. Want to go work in a clinic or someplace where the environment, do some telehealth where it's less stressful. But hospital work is really, really draining. And hospitals I know are working to try to retain staff, but it's very, very complicated. So I do think that even though Joe and Spet's numbers say we're going to actually have a surplus, my gut is we really won't, because I think people are going to continue to leave in droves until we fix some of the environmental issues, some of the issues around safety, the way, the pandemic has really changed the way patients and visitors communicate with the nursing staff, which makes it very challenging. So it's multifaceted, but I don't see us having a surplus of nurses by 2030. I mean, I would be amazed if we actually did, because I think we're going to continue to see people leave. And from the information that Brendan just provided, more people intend to leave, right? I mean, he said those Joanne's numbers didn't include the impact of the pandemic because it's not really known yet.
I think Joanne's numbers did. I'll go ahead and continue to look at that. I know that she talked about, they projected out numbers of retirements and people that plan to leave. They do utilize both the school data that comes in as well as workforce data that's collected. And so in her report, she does talk about taking into that age, retirement, not being satisfied with their work environment, et cetera, and leaving the profession altogether, not even just retiring or changing jobs. And so she did take that into consideration. She still has us projected to meet or exceed those expectations by 2029. But I also want to make sure that I remind that everybody that we've done a lot of work as a board on increasing enrollments over the last few years. And when you look at the enrollment growth that has occurred in the last few years by our board, that will now start to be seen and felt by our people that are looking to hire. And when you look at 2018, we increased our nursing slots by 304 students. into our schools. In 2019, we increased it by 802 new student slots into our schools. In 2020, during COVID, when that broke out, we took a dip. We went back down to 282 new student slots into our schools. In 2021, our board heeded the call, and we approved 1,499 new students entering into academia that had never been there before. Those almost 1,500 new students approved in 2021, if they're associate degree, they're graduating now. If they're bachelor's degree, they're graduating next year. That 1,500 additional students added to the workforce on an annual basis will be felt this year and next year. In 2022, the board added an additional 1,197 new student slots. For associate degree programs, those students will be graduating next year. You will see them hitting our workforce, and you will also see them hitting our workforce with their bachelor's degree programs potentially the following year. That will be in addition to the continued growth that we felt of the 1,500 that were approved the year prior. That 1,500 doesn't go away, it just gets added and compounded. And so in 2022, we added a 1,200 to the 1,500 that was already approved. In a 2-year time span, we increased our enrollments for nursing students by 2,600 spots. That's additional students. In 2023, year to date, not including what just got approved today, but year to date coming into here, our board has already approved growth of 1,288 new students entering into our pipeline. So if you look at just the last 3 years post-COVID, so we're looking at 2021, 2022, and 2023, our board has increased just new students to be enrolled on an annual basis into our board, almost 4,000. That's 3,984. When you're looking at a baseline of 30,000 nursing students, and just in the last 3, we've increased it on an annual basis by a minimum 4,000 students, we are doing well. Our board was very proactive. When we saw the impact that COVID had in 2022, our board said, how can we help? And we approved enrollment increases. Every one that was put in front of our board in 2020, 2021, and 2022 were approved. In 2021, we did do a slight reduction to one of the schools, and that school was located in Irvine. And the concern at that point, again, was location. And so they requested 64 students. Our board approved them for 24. And they returned to the board in 2022 and got the additional 40 students. The next request came through, our board approved, they requested for 70. Our board said, I can't do 70, but I can approve 30. And so our board approved 30. If you look at 2018 forward, the only time our board made a choice not to approve or to defer action, those were in Santa Ana, Riverside, Los Angeles, and Irvine. Those are the only locations in the entire state that our board said, hey, I don't know how this community is going to be able to support this. And I'm not confident that the impact of adding students to these locations will not have a negative impact on the academic institutions currently established there. And they go by the data of what is reported by our schools that says, hey, I'm losing clinical spots. I don't have enough faculty. I don't have enough clinical placements. I can't support what I currently have going, and you want to add more in this area, you're going to further negatively affect us and will further negatively have an impact to the students that are currently enrolled, not potentially new students coming in. So hopefully that additional data will be able to show that just this year, without even taking into consideration what occurred today, we're almost at 1,300 approvals, which last year was 1,200 for the entire year. We're still missing a quarter's worth of data. I can go ahead and quickly do the math on that. as we guys continue to talk, to tell you what additional numbers we approved today already, if that's helpful. But we are absolutely securing a pipeline for nurses. It is projected that we'll meet it even with retirements, even with people leaving positions at this point. But again, the big issue is not the body in the role, it's the experience that is lost, and the mentorship that's needed for these students that are coming out and being hired.
I would like to say something really quick, and then next would be David Lawler. You know, for years, our new grads in this state had to go out of state to get experience. Why? A lot of hospitals did away with their new grad training programs and basically cherry picked from travelers or other nurses coming in from out of state. And now, you know, we're turning out the students in these nursing programs and they need somewhere to go for jobs. This is a time hospitals need to open up their new grad programs again and give these new grads jobs, because these new grads want to stay in the area that they've established as home. They don't want to uproot themselves and their families to go out of state to get a year's experience and then come back in to get a job. So a lot of the hospitals I'm noticing now this past year have started to do that, and I applaud that. Even in Northern California, you know, Northern California, I work for Kaiser Permanente. We get a lot of applicants. We're not short of nurses, and I believe that's because we look at the working conditions that we put our nurses in. We offer benefits for them, and you know, I think we look out for them. So I think it's time where our hospitals here in California really need to look at our new grads coming out and say, okay, because new grads, if you give them the opportunity to train, and they'll probably stay with you. They'll probably not move on if you give them that opportunity to stay within state. Just a small side statement. David?
Well, I'm glad you said that, Dolores, because I was about to feel bad for putting it on the hospitals, which I know isn't our thing, because I'm about to. And Mary, I think I'm directing the question at you. Based on what Lori just said, I have to ask, why can't hospitals, and I'm asking this as an ignorant, I'll admit, public member, grow their capacity knowing this is a problem? They're not, you know, they know this is a problem. So how does it work? I don't know how it works. Why don't I see 24 students in every wing, on every floor, in every hospital, 24/7?
Reasons. That's a great question, David. And that's one of the things that I can tell you as a nursing administrator that we are constantly grappling with was how can we do more? And I think, Dolores, your point is 100% correct. Hospitals have opened up. In our environment, we went from having about 20 new grads 3 times a year to 50 new grads 3 times a year. So more than doubled in the past 2 years, the number of new grads that we're taking. The challenges new grads are new grads when they come on board, that we have had to implement because of training changes that happened with COVID, a whole 2-week boot camp at the beginning before their orientation ever starts so that they learn how to start an IV. They know how to do a blood pressure, some of these very basic things that they didn't get. And then the new grad orientation is between 16 and 20 weeks. So it's really a long time. And that becomes then a drain. I mean, it's very exciting for someone when you're training a new grad because they have so much positive energy, but it's a lot of work. And Dolores, and I'm sure Jovita can attest to this, that it's a lot of work to be taking care of your patients and training somebody the whole time. So the idea of trying to get experienced nurses, and if you would just go look on any hospital websites, people are offering very high sign-on bonuses for experienced people because they can get oriented in like 6 weeks or something, you know, depending. It's all competency based. But also to your point, Dolores, a lot of the new grads, this may not continue to be the same, but after they have 2 years of experience, they can go travel And that's what we see is people, I want to come back someday, but I have a chance to go to Hawaii or I have a chance to go here. And as long as the travel business is as lucrative as it is now, I think we're going to continue to see that level of turnover. Hopefully they will come back at a later date. I think I hope, Lori, I really, really hope for hospitals. I'm getting ready to retire, so it's not going to be my challenge going forward, but I really hope the numbers that we've improved are going to continue to have that pipeline. And you're right, I'm probably underestimating all that we've already, the numbers we've already increased, but the challenge is really, it is on the retention side big time. And I just want to make one other point just to Allison's question about, I wasn't at the Education Licensing Committee meeting, but the thing to me that I just can't justify is how could we approve a new program when we turned others down?
Yes.
We've already said no to some others, and now why all of a sudden is this program? Because I know the programs that they presented were good, and we said it just can't be accommodated in this area. So I don't know how, I could, with a good conscience say that we're going to approve this one when we didn't approve the others.
Dolores, I have a comment.
Yes, Tricia.
Thank you. I really just want to thank Mary and Dolores, our nurses on the nursing board. Of course, there are other nurses, but really for sharing with us, especially us public members, just kind of giving us an inside view into the, what is really happening on the ground. You're really our reality check. And I just wanted to tell you guys how much I appreciate you taking the time to walk us through the scenarios.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To help answer David's question. So what I'm seeing on my end, I'm heavily involved on the UC side, and UCs were really reluctant to hire. We're starting to see more and more hospitals like Kaiser, like Dolores mentioned, hiring more, including the UCs, but they were really reluctant to hire for about a couple of years after COVID. I think a lot of it had to do with budget, and staffing is a very heavy load for hospitals, right? So UCSF had a hiring freeze that they're just coming off of, and in this day and age, it's unheard of to have a hiring freeze. So budgetary constraints are a huge component of it. So I think now that we're starting to see more and more hospitals opening up, I hope that we can retain some of the people that train out here, the new grads especially. That is a big pull. Most hospitals are interested in new grads, but like someone mentioned here, I can't remember who it was, but preceptors, right? The experienced people are leaving. So we don't have enough trainers. So it's pretty messy right now. Just being boots on the ground. It's interesting to see. I've been in the field now. It's going on my third decade. I hate to say that, but we've always been in a shortage ever since I've been working, and I think it's going to continue for quite a long time. I know the studies indicate otherwise, but we're seeing new things happening, like workplace violence. And so that's driving a lot of people out of the field as well. So there's a lot of things we have to address, and hopefully this board can do that over time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And it's difficult to see the impact of what the board has done because the first graduates are hitting workforce this year from the associate degree programs that were approved in 2021 when we started to do that. So I think as the years go on, we'll be able to see the impact of what the board has done by being very proactive in doing these enrollment increases and addition of new campuses and new locations and new programs and feasibility. I did promise to get back to you guys on numbers, and we approved 4 enrollment increases. Those additional numbers for the enrollment increases were additional 106 students added to our numbers that were reported. We also established 3 new nursing programs with the vote that the board just took today. And those 3 new nursing programs will add an additional 190 students on an annual basis into the areas that they were approved. And then we did additionally approve a feasibility, and that program is expecting to enroll additional 90 students if they are able to come into compliance with the board's rules and regulations and make that work. So when you look at our numbers for this year, including what the board has done up until this agenda item, and it has been verified, I pulled the numbers quickly, is we had 1,288. And that 1,288 added to the numbers that I just gave you have us at 1,584 new nursing students being added to our schools just this year. That is the largest enrollment increase that the board has ever done. Again, 2018, 304, 2019, 802, 2020, COVID, 282, 2021, when we started to work to mitigate the effects that we saw happening from COVID, 1,499, 2022, an additional 1,197, and in 2023, we've beat our record with 1,584 today. And so we will start to see the effects, remembering that the enrollment increases approved this year will not reach workforce for at minimum 2 years, more likely 3 years. And so this feasibility study, if approved today, still has to go through a self-study, typically takes about 6 months. And then they would have to start the program. This is an associate degree program. The expectation is it would be 2 years. And so if this program were to start enrolling students the end of next year in 2024, they said they projected fall of 2024, those students, these ones that they're referring to right here of 90 students, would not hit workforce until 2026. And so we've already started addressing workforce starting in 2021 so that we can feel the effect starting this year of what our board's been doing.
Dolores,
Yes.
do we need to take public comment before we get a motion?
Well, we have the school here. I believe they've been elevated.
Yes, they're here. Would you like to ask questions?
Yes. Yes, I think.
Adele, are you able to unmute?
Yes.
Hi, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Here comes the questions.
Go
Hi,
ahead.
Adele.
Go ahead.
Adele?
Yes.
Hi, this is Dolores.
Hi, Dolores.
Hi, I have a question for you. Would you be willing to consider a different location that is not as impacted as Region 8?
Oh, 100% sure.
You know, maybe the San Joaquin Valley, Northern California?
Yeah, I love Northern California. Yeah, we are very willing to consider that, Dolores. You asked that question before.
Yeah.
The last time, and we were thinking about it. So I have a question for you, though.
Good.
So if we are considering another location, we're going to do a feasibility study again, which, we're looking forward to it. Are we going to pay another $40,000?
No, you're not going to pay any more money, Adele.
Yeah.
You're already in the process. You will just, like you said, it depends on, sometimes it's just adjusting stuff that's in for a different location, but anything that's going to change on the IO1 for your feasibility, anything that's going to change, you'll update for your new area, region, whatever. No, it doesn't cost you any more. You'd still stay with your NEC, and you work through that process.
Okay, that's very good. Very good to hear.
Okay.
Okay. Any more questions?
No, we look forward to seeing you back with a new location.
And do I have a deadline to do this as fast as I can, or?
I believe that depends on you, right, Marianne?
Yeah, we don't really have a hard and fast deadline. It's going to be how it works out for you, because like we talked about earlier, Adele, you and your team will have to look at other areas and do all your research and all the stuff that you have done for the first location at a different location. So just keep working with Donna and keep us posted, and we'll work with you.
Yes, that's very good. We want to thank you and the group, though. Before that, good afternoon. I didn't say good afternoon. I am Adele Vidal Blanco, Designated Program Director for the proposed program. We want to thank you for everything that you have done and supported us from the Education Licensing Committee up to this time. I have a speech prepared, but we have discussed it already. Our request is for only 30 students, though, at this time. And I believe that such tiny number is not likely to impact much larger schools. But since we are moving to a non-impacted area, that would be that would probably be good for us.
Okay, thanks so much, Adele, for being here.
And
Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you also for your support and everything. And we would like to thank Dana Ship, Ms. Ship, to help us go through this, and looking forward to working with her again.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much. This is the second time we talk with you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Did you want to make a motion?
Do we need a
Is the
motion?
motion to not accept the feasibility study and just send them back to the drawing board?
Yeah.
Well, I think what we would do is be defer, and Lori will jump in and help me, but I think you would defer action, like we did for West Cliff, where we, deferred action. We didn't do anything. And they will come back when they're ready with a new site.
Yes. Motion to not do anything?
I believe we do. So this is Jovita. So I would take a motion to defer the feasibility study for the new pre-licensure nursing program, Homestead Schools Associate Degree Nursing Program, with a projected annual enrollment of 30 students in fall of 2024, 60 students in fall of 2025, and 90 students in 2026. Fall of 2026. Thereafter, for an annual enrollment of 90 students and projected start of in fall 2024, pending completion of the requirements set forth in 16 CCR 1421 application for approval, including board acceptance of a self-study demonstrating that it meets the requirements of the section 1424 through 1432 and sections 2786A and B for the code. Do I have a second?
I second.
No, please don't.
Thank you. Maybe BRN moderator, maybe.
Can you hear me?
Hold on.
This is Reza.
Yes.
I think Lori's trying to chime in. I see some head motion.
Do not second, please. That is not an acceptable motion.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That is a
Okay, we were-
motion if we were to accept the feasibility study. That motion is we would accept the feasibility, and then they would not be able to start a program unless they completed all of those additional requirements that you read off. If you are not accepting a feasibility study, you would say, I'm not accepting the feasibility study for the new pre-licensure nursing program, Homestead Schools Associate Degree Nursing Program. You would not.
Or she was deferring.
She was deferring.
I'm explaining. I do hear that. So deferring taking action to answer the question that Trish put out first before we made the motion, no. To defer taking action, the board does not have to make any motion whatsoever. You would just not make a motion. Or you could say, I will defer taking action. The reason why you would state you would defer take action on this one is so that you can give the guidance. And so what you would say is, I'm deferring taking action on this feasibility study request to allow the school to come back to the board with a proposed new location. And so that would be why you would state you're deferring action, because you would give the school specific direction as to what the board is needing in order to approve them at a future time. If you are just not going to take an action and you have no plan to do anything with them ever again in the future, Tricia is correct. You just don't have to do anything. That is why these agenda items say and possible action, because the board can choose just to not take any action. So hopefully I've provided some guidance. If we're accepting it, we would read that entire thing. If we are denying it, we would deny the feasibility study up until the name of the program. If we are deferring action with the intent that they can come back, you would defer action and give them what the board is requiring of them to come back to be able to possibly be approved at a future date. So hopefully I've provided some clarification. And if someone wants to make a motion to defer and give them direction, that would be awesome. And then you could second that.
Go ahead, Jovita.
Go ahead.
Is it acceptable to say to defer to defer for the following meeting in January? Is it in January already, 2024?
The program will decide when they are ready to come back. They will reach out to their nursing education consultant. The nursing education consultant would then review the information that is provided to them. And once the nursing education consultant vets that, ensures that everything is ready, that nursing education consultant will then reach out to the education liaison, get that added to the agenda, and they'll come forward. There is no timeline that is required with this because it is not a currently approved nursing program. And so what the motion could be is I make a motion to defer taking action on the feasibility study to allow the program to seek a new geographic location and come back in front of the board when they have met the requirements as decided by the NEC and the program, et cetera, whatever you want to do at that point, or just leave it as soon as they've met the requirements.
So I make a motion where we defer and allow the program Homestead School Associate Degree Nursing Program to come back at a later time when they have found a new location. Do I have a second?
Vicky.
It's Vicky. Thank you very much, Vicky. BRN moderator, may we take it to public comment?
Excuse me, this is Board Member Cormack. Could we ask questions about this motion before it goes to
Sure.
public comment? This is the time, right?
Yeah, this is the time. BRN moderator, please hold off on public comment until all questions and comments have been made by the board.
I'm concerned about just saying a new location. It sounds as if we're directing applicants as to where they should have their programs. And I wonder if the maker and the seconder would be open to amending the phrase new location to a location that is not affected by, clinical placements or whatever else it is that, we need to add. But, I'm a little uncomfortable with just the new location. And if staff has suggestions about how to modify that, just to be sure that we're really not telling people where to go, we're telling people why programs should be located in should and shouldn't be located. I'm not sure I'm making sense. Might be time for a snack. Director Melby or perhaps our legal counsel would like to help with the wording. It makes me uncomfortable to just suggest a new location.
This is Reza. Go ahead, Lori.
What specifically was raised as a concern was the impact of a new school in that geographic location. So what you could say in a motion is to return to the board when the items that have been raised in communication have been addressed by potentially the geographic location. There are many things that you can word it. The key is, and I'll let Reza kind of go further on this, is that we're not telling them where to go. We're just telling them that the reason they were not approved in this location was based on the geographic area that they chose. There was too many things that were blocking them from receiving approval And in order to kind of rectify that, they would potentially be able to do that by looking at a new location. So I think the biggest concern is just not telling them where to go. Reza, you can chime in.
This is Reza. I thought that the language of the motion, didn't give me too much discomfort. I understand your point, Allison, but if I'm not sure if you have had in mind something any more specific than that regarding location, and I would think new location as it was phrased is kind of more generic and broad, and that frankly was the feedback. Also, just to point out, the obvious, that I think the program itself was extremely receptive to the concern that the board had, and it, as we said several agenda items ago, we're not directing them where to be. I think that the communication was pretty clear that there were some concerns about where it was proposed, and so
If staff's not concerned, then that's fine.
yeah, but absolutely, that's something I am mindful of. I appreciate you being mindful of that's not what we do, but there were concerns as through a lengthy discussion were raised about the proposed location, and beyond that, we weren't really directing them, but they seemed to have a lot of openness to exploring other areas. So. So I would leave it at
motion as it is now. Are we okay with voting on the motion? As
I think where we were was going to public comment, and we hadn't had an opportunity for other members of the board to discuss this particular.
Yeah, I just didn't know if we needed to redo the motion again. That's the reason why I'm asking. Okay.
No, I think the motion itself stands. There was a second.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, unless there's any other further board member comment or discussion or questions.
Yeah.
We can go into public comment.
Second.
Yes, I was.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board members? No? BRN moderator, can you please open it up for public comment?
We will be opening for public comment now. Please refer to the screen share for members of the public to see how they should type in the request for comment. I've activated the question and answer feature. Members of the public can indicate they would like to make a comment by typing into the question box, "I would like to make a comment." Please remember, you will have 2 minutes to make your comments. I will not give a reminder as your time approaches. I do not want to interrupt you nor cause you to lose your train of thought. I will mute your microphone and inform you that your time has expired, and we'll move on to the next member of the public. I'll pause for a moment for members of the public to type in, "I would like to make a comment." Dr. Linda Reed would like to make a comment. 1 second, please. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. The one thing that I just haven't heard as part of this discussion is for baccalaureate programs, and I believe also for ADN programs, we do have national accreditation or regional accreditation standards for employment post-graduation. So I do think the nursing shortage has to be identified and has to be kind of realistically measured before we add schools that then can't get their students employed, because that is going to prevent them, if they're a new school, from even achieving accreditation. And particularly for ADN programs, if they're not accredited, then those students often have difficulty finding a baccalaureate program to move into. So I just wanted to share that thought. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Board President Trujillo, there are no other requests for comments. Would you like me to close this window?
Yes, thank you. All right, we have a motion and a second on the table.
Dolores, do you mind if I reread the motion?
Sure.
Thank you. Defer action to allow the program to come back at a later time when they have found a new location. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second on the table. We'll go into the board vote. Dolores Trujillo votes yes. Vice President Mary Fagan. Board Member Jovita Dominguez.
Jovita Dominguez votes yes.
Board Member Tricia Nguyen. Board Member David Lawler.
David Lawler, yes.
Board Member Vicki Granowitz. Board Member Allison Cormack.
Cormack, yes.
And Board Member Neelu Patel.
Patel, yes.
All right, thank you. I would like to have a bio break. Bio break. Let's take a short break before we go into the next agenda item.
How long would you like to take?
We can come back at 3:30. That'd be 15 minutes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
See you in 15 minutes.